So I think we'll just go ahead and get started here. Today we've got Loretta Little with WRF Capital out of Seattle. And, I would probably say of, all the kind of the funds that are based outside the area, over the years, WRF has kind of been one of the more active firms that have come over to Spokane. I'm sure Loretta will talk about it in her presentation, but they're an investor in Spokane-based MedCurity. Loretta has been with WRF for 33 years. So I'm presuming she knows the firm well enough to give us a satisfactory overview. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to you. I know you have some slides here. And then after that, I've got a handful of questions, but I also really encourage others to ask questions. And you can either just jump in and ask a question, or you could submit it through me and I'll call on you. But with that, Loretta, tell us about WRF Capital.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me in this conversation today. So I have a few slides there. I just pulled them from a large deck, and so they're not numbered particularly correctly, but I just wanted to show the ones that I thought you would be most interested in. So I'm a managing director at WRF Capital. WRF stands for the Washington Research Foundation. The Washington Research Foundation was established in 1981 as a private self-funded nonprofit to help in the commercialization of technologies coming out of Washington research institutions. And our founders funded us with a guaranteed note out of their own pockets. And they wanted us to be a private, flexible, not tied to the state, not tied to any university entity that could help these research institutions. So the foundation was started in the early 80s. It was just past the Bayh-Dole Act, so all universities owned the IP that was created using federal funds at that time. We were essentially the licensing arm of most of the research institutions in the state for about 10 years. We would take the technologies and patent them on our own dime and then try and license them. And from successful revenues or returns, we would take off the patent costs, take out a portion, but most of it will go back to the research institution. And it took about 10 years because a lot of that technology is very early stage, but eventually we had a couple families of patents that started to grow the monies coming back to the WRF. And that enabled us about 20 years ago to do what we call a spin-off. It's WRF Capital. It's just another name for what we do as an early stage investor. And we're essentially an evergreen fund, so we don't have outside money from anywhere else except one small grant from a Department of Commerce, Washington Department of Commerce. But we've been investing in early stage companies in Washington for about 20 years now. So this slide is just very general who we are. We have, over the years, returned over $150 million, primarily to the University of Washington through either licensing revenues or grants and gifts. And as a nonprofit, we make grants every year to the various research institutions in the state. Here again, it's we make grants, and some of these numbers I realize need to be updated, but we make grants through the foundation. We make investments through WRF Capital. Our current portfolio, again, this is a number, I think we now have 36 active companies. We just made an investment a few weeks ago and made a decision, I think this week, to invest in another company. So we partner with all the nonprofits in the state, some more active than others. We do quite a lot of communication with the University of Washington, of course, the Fred Hutchins Cancer Research Center, Washington State University, Seattle Children's, and others. This is just very quickly the number in grants that we've made to the various research institutions. This does not include our the licensing revenues that we earned and then provided back to the research institutions. So our grants through the foundation are in several areas, primarily people and projects. So here you can see it says faculty recruitment and young investigators. We have a fellowship program that funds postdocs to work in areas that are cross-pollinating across various research institutions. We've just opened the application process for our third cohort and are getting some really amazing applicants. But the part that I wanted to discuss with you that some of you may actually qualify is the technology development grants. And they are phased, phase 1, 2, and 3. Phase 1 are about $50,000 and phase 2 are in the $200,000 to $250,000, and then phase 3 are probably $500,000 and above. And these are grants to help turn the commercialization wheel and get technologies further towards being successfully commercialized. These grants are to research institutions, so they are not to for-profit companies. But if any of you are looking at technologies coming out of one of the research institutions and the technology is not already encumbered, you know, you might want to talk to one of the PIs at the university about looking into one of these grants. So here again, very quickly, is just a discussion of our phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. We make about, I think this year, this is the end of our fiscal year this month, I think we've made about 29 phase 1 grants. So we're hoping that we can help these grant applicants as they start to move technologies forward. And if what it turns out to be is a good licensing opportunity for one of the research institutions, that's fantastic. We're helping get the technology to benefit the public. If it turns out that it goes to a startup company, that's great too, and we hope we have the opportunity to then invest. So WRF Capital is the investment vehicle of the Washington Research Foundation, as it says here. We invest about $5 million a year in all private companies. So that's our existing portfolio companies and our and the new opportunities that come to us. We invest initially about $250,000 or so in new opportunities, and we invest up to about $3 million in any one company, and that's over several rounds. Although we don't, very often we don't get to the $3 million mark. If we do, that's usually in pharma or biotech companies. Usually before that time, there's either an exit or we have decided not to continue investing our pro rata in follow-on rounds. So most of the companies, well, let's step back. All of the companies are in Washington. So that is a requirement. The company has to be located in Washington. We prefer to invest in life science and healthcare companies, although we do invest in enabling technologies too. And we prefer that there be some sort of tie to a research institution in the state, whether the technology comes out of that research institution or the team does. That's our preference. It's not a requirement, as is our investment in MedCurity, and I'll get to that later on in the talk, but probably 80% of our companies have some sort of tie to a research institution. And we are very often the first money in, sometimes via convertible note to help span to get to the seed round. Not the last investment, the one just before that, we led a convertible note and were able to get some syndicate partners in. And now the company is going out for a priced round. So here are 3 of our companies that we invested in. And I think Tom might have a question later about additional companies, but these are 3. company propaganda. We've been investing now for 20 years. As I was telling Tom earlier, a lot of the experience from our licensing side enabled some of our diligence and helped us as we moved to the investing side too. So here it talks about, again, our focus. We invest only in Washington, and we hope to be able to invest in some of the best life science companies and healthcare companies in the state. Here's our investment portfolio. It's all over the place. My colleague, Will Canistero, is responsible for most of the opportunities that we look at in the biotech and pharma space. I take a look at medical devices, healthcare IT, and digital health. So, and then we both look at opportunities outside of those areas. So here are our founders, the three gentlemen who put up the guaranteed note. Hunter Simpson, who was at the time the CEO of Physio Control, Bill Gates Sr., and Tom Cable. And many of you know Tom, and Tom is still on our board, and his son Kevin is also on our board, Kevin Cable of Cascadia. This is our group. We're a small group. Although right now Beth Etscheid, who's our director of grants, is retiring at the end of the month, and our new addition is David Schultz, who was at the Gates Foundation at PATH and also in private company and CROs. Oh, one of the people I want to point out here is our manager of research and information services. So for the companies, when I'm doing diligence, or when we're all doing diligence on the grants and on the investments, there's a lot of research that we try and do as part of the diligence process. And Kim Emmons is our manager of research and information sciences, and she's absolutely key. So as we're looking at the IP or the markets, or get some more information about industries, people, she's our go-to person. And so for our portfolio companies, she is available, and she's a great asset to our team. Here's our board. Jackie Brainerd and Kevin Cable live in Spokane, and yeah, this is our current board. And that's it. So I hope that was sufficient in giving you an idea who we are, and if you have more questions, please let me know.
Fantastic. Well, with your focus on life sciences, and now that we have 2 medical schools here in Spokane, with more medical students than Seattle, we're hoping to see more of you and deploy more capital in our area. But why don't you start out with one thing that a lot of people in Spokane want to know, or young entrepreneurs, is how do you approach a VC fund or an angel fund? So kind of a 2-part question is, how do you source your investments? And maybe by way of example, how did you find MedCurity?
That's a good question. So part of our opportunities come through our granting program. And if we've been in touch with them from early on and have funded a phase 1, 2, and 3 grant, we are pretty well versed in what they're doing, the team, and actually we invested in 2 companies this last year in which they came through our granting process. The other is just, as everyone says, through contacts. So it can be other angel groups, attorneys, people that we have invested with before. I just had a talk with a former CEO of one of our portfolio companies yesterday, and he said he has a new company, and I definitely want to know about it, and hopefully we'll be able to invest in that. And MedCurity, I heard about MedCurity from actually several contacts when I said I was coming out to Spokane and wanted to meet with some really great companies. And we were given names and contact information. And I think that's when I contacted Amanda and I said, can we meet? Is that the case, Amanda? I don't know. Yep, okay. And then people like you, Tom, just, you know, when I get a company, because you know the kinds of companies we invest in, we're not going to invest in a company in LA or Chicago. We're not going to invest in a retail clothing company. But if you say, hey, you should take a look at this company, I absolutely will take a look at the company. It may not be a fit for whatever reason, but hopefully it's a quick no thank you. And many times it's, hey, I want to learn more. Can I get an intro?
Okay. And for those of you who are not familiar with MedCurity, MedCurity is a company here in Spokane that has developed some solutions for HIPAA compliance. And Amanda and maybe perhaps Joe was on the call here today, but really kind of a great poster child for our ecosystem here in Spokane. They initially received seed funding from Mind to Market, and then they presented at the Spokane Angel Alliance and received investment from the Kickstart funds and from the Kohl's company, and then most recently some additional capital from WRF. So really kind of a great case study of how we can secure capital for Spokane-based companies. But back to my question, how do you recommend, what's the best way for a very early stage company, perhaps ones that don't have ties to a research institution, what's the best way for them to get a hold of a fund like yours and put their best foot forward?
You can absolutely contact me. If it really helps if you understand what we invest in. Again, I get probably 4 opportunities a day coming in over the transom where they're just totally not, they're not something, you know, a gaming company from Russia, oil company from Qatar. I mean,
Yeah.
but if you know what we invest in, if you send us especially a 1-page executive summary, which helps very quickly put your company in context in the sorts of things that we look at. You know, are you in Washington? What is the problem you're trying to solve? How are you solving it? Why are you unique? Just generally about the market and about the team and what you're looking to raise. That quickly will give me an idea of, do I want to set up a call and let's learn more, or it's not quite a fit for us. No, thank you.
So know your audience.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, one of the things that I was actually unaware until you spoke to it in your presentation was the grants that you make to research institutions. Mm-hmm. Are the research institutions in and around the Spokane area, are they adequately aware of that source of funding?
I'm hoping so. WSU definitely is. Actually, I'm evaluating 2 WSU grant applications right now. We do a little bit, especially for phase 1s, we don't do a huge amount of diligence, deep as if we're doing an investment in a company, but we do a little diligence to understand what they're trying to do and kind of how far they are from having the solution. But I'm hoping the institutions do. We know Andrew, we know Courtney. Our October board meeting was in Spokane. And so, yeah, I'm hoping they know about us.
Okay. We have a question from Tyler Lafferty. Tyler, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tom. Hey, Loretta, really appreciate you being on here with all of us. I was hoping maybe you could explain a little bit more, maybe give an example of the access that your portfolio companies get to the director of research or others on the team. Kind of what does that look like when they're working together?
So when we're doing diligence on a company, very often Kim is on calls or at least in the email stream and helping me get a better idea of understanding the market, because we get a lot of opportunities that claim that they address a certain part of the market, or that the market size or the competitors, and we have to push back on that a little bit. And so Kim helps take a look at that for us, and also on the IP side. And so she's familiar already with the company, with the technology, the market. And so when the company does become a portfolio company, they have her email. And if they want to see if she can get the 10 Qs for the top 5 companies in the area and help them, you know, take a look at what the research budgets are, or whatever it happen to be. I mean, she can help do that. She can put alerts in the patent system. So if there are a particular area that you want to be aware of who is patenting in a particular area. This happens a lot when there are the biggies, for example, in ultrasound. She can put an alert. And so if a patent is published, not necessarily issued, but even before that, published, and it contains a certain number of keywords, it'll pop up, and she will get it, and she will make it available to the company. Okay.
Katrina, did you have a question? Katrina Rogers?
Yes, I absolutely do have a question. Thanks, Tom. And thanks, Loretta, for talking to us today. I have a follow-up question to Tom's question about the university programs. I'd like to know how you've used the faculty postdoc recruitment programs in the past to help develop targeted innovation spaces at universities.
It's more reactive, unfortunately, than proactive. My colleagues have been better about going down to Pullman. I'm trying to get better at going to Spokane, but meeting with department chairs, meeting with the head of tech transfer, and saying, okay, so who should we know? Who should we be talking to on your campuses? Who's working on some really interesting, innovative stuff? And that's primarily the way we make connections. And so the postdocs, that's a little bit more difficult, because especially from if they don't know about our fellowships, but we're trying to get the word out to pretty broadly. Our director of communications advertises in all sorts of journals and places, and so I don't know the specifics about where he advertises, but the ads for our fellowships are out there.
Okay. But you would be open to those conversations if someone came to you with some ideas for that regard, right?
You mean for on our fellowship program, or that with a startup opportunity or an idea?
I feel like it's more about the faculty recruitment and fellowship programs.
The fellowship programs, yeah, I think the best thing would be to be talking with our director of grants. The faculty recruitment, that's an area that we have in the past been very involved in. I think it's been less an area of grants for various reasons, but it's mainly on the fellowship side that's been an area of focus for us.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate your answer.
Mark Gustafson, I know you have a question. I know you have to drop off, but do you have a chance to ask your question before you have to head out?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Just interested in the sort of the stage of the capital, WRF Capital investments. Would a company be seeking investment sort of after they, say, get an SBIR grant, or would you be earlier stage than that?
Both. I mean, it can be before an SBIR, or during or after. I mean, we are very often the first money in. We try not to be the only first money in, because it's just really risky capital. But we will invest before there's an SBIR. Actually, so this company that I invested in fairly recently, we led the convertible note, and I just was told by the CEO last week that he got an SBIR. So that's great. That was really nice to hear. So both.
Thank you. Good to know.
So Loretta, you've been with WRF for
A long time.
33 years, and I think you said it was maybe 10 years later that you started actually making investments in young companies, but that's a good long track record. And someone with your experience, I've always kind of enjoyed asking, based on your experience, and you're investing at an early stage, what are kind of the 3 key predictors of success?
Well, the one that obviously is, team, the team, and we've learned through School of Hard Knocks that you invest in the team that you invest in, if that makes any sense. In the early days, we invested in the team that said that they were interim, but they were not interim, and they weren't the right team. So you have to have confidence in it, that at least the bones of the team are there for the medium to long term. The other things are they have to be raising adequate capital. It's so painful to have an undercapitalized company where the CEO spends all of her or his time raising money. It's just painful. And if you don't have an agreement early on that about the amount of capital being raised, then it's not a good fit because expectations are not aligned. And then just, I think there has to be just I think a really good connection between the investor and the startup, and that starts as a basis because we invest in the long term, and no company ever, in my experience, hits all their milestones and everything goes according to plan. They're always,
That
as
never
you know,
happens?
Tom. There actually was one company, it hit one major bump, but everything else, so far as projections of growth and everything, they exceeded, which was just like mind-blowing. But things don't ever happen the way that you think they're going to, and so you have to be able to have the hard discussions and feel comfortable, getting things out on the table and having those discussions, whether it's about, where you are or where you plan to go. The other thing is, I think you need to all agree on the key milestones and the value of those milestones, because if you don't, and I have in the past, when there's not disagreement, when there is disagreement, again, there's no alignment. So you need to agree on the key milestones and the value of achieving those. And when you have a company that hits those milestones, it's just amazing. And very often they don't, but for reasons that make sense. So that's fine too.
All excellent observations. One of the points that you made is when you invest, ensuring the company has sufficient capital so the team isn't constantly out passing the hat. Mm-hmm. When you make an investment, is there a certain period of time for which you want to have a reasonable degree of confidence that this cash, that your investment will last? Mm-hmm. And if so, what is it?
If it's a priced round, at least a year, the distraction and the cost of priced rounds are high, so you want to keep that to a minimum. And if you look at the timeline on a priced round, assuming you have, say, 2 or 3 key milestones that you want to achieve with that money, you have to have time to achieve those. And if there are hiccups, then there are hiccups, and you continue to move forward. But you've got to go, if you're planning to have additional funding in say a year, that it's not enough time, because you have to start going out to raise the money in 9 months minimum, and then but you haven't had time to hit the milestone. So I prefer that they raise money for at least a year of operations, and then maybe another 3 to 4 months to raise the next capital. If it's a convertible note, most convertible notes don't last a year because they're just not enough money. But there has to be, it really needs to be a bridge, as you've probably all heard, and not a pier, so that you can see the next financing in the horizon, and it's not just we're raising this money because it's, you know, with hope that we can raise additional money in the future, sometime way in the future. Just one thing to note, at least in our neck of the woods, and most of the people I know, they don't like safe financing vehicles. That's just, I've been seeing more of those lately, and it's problematic for raising money from knowledgeable investors or angel groups in the area.
Yeah, I typically want to see a minimum of 18 months, because if it's only a year, frankly, you've got to start fundraising in 6 months.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Fundraising is anywhere between 3 to 6 months. And so I like to say, have money for at least a year, then kick off your next fundraising to give you at least 6 months to get it.
Yeah.
You know, you did reference kind of a price round and a note, and that was kind of one of my questions too. You know, first of all, there's a lot of confusions. I mean, what is the difference between a safe and a convertible note? Or are they the same thing?
No, they are not the same thing.
Okay.
So safes are a vehicle that were developed in the Valley to provide capital to really hot companies, where you had a lot of potential investors, usually very early, usually angels, wanting to get in a deal. The company could pick and choose. They didn't want to do a lot of negotiating. They didn't want, it's kind of a take it or leave it. A safe is not a debt vehicle. And a lot of people think that it's some sort of loan, like a convertible note. A convertible note converts, but it also if there's another financing in the future, but it also has some protections if things don't go according to plan. So, but a safe doesn't. A safe just, the only way that a safe will work for you as an early stage investor is if there is another financing in the future. If it never happens, if things don't go the way you thought they would go, there are no protections in a safe.
For the investor.
For the investor, yeah.
But isn't
Safes
that
are
also
very company friendly.
but isn't that the case also with a convertible note? I mean, if you get to the maturity date 18 months out, and the company doesn't have the capital to pay it back, and there's no follow-on financing, you as an investor are still kind of stuck.
Well, this is assuming that the company can still continue to operate. They're usually in a convertible note. There is a optional circumstances. So, for example, sometimes your investment will convert to common, or it will convert to the last round of financing at that price or at a different price. But at least there are some options for you as an investor, whereas in a safe, there are none.
Okay. because the two instruments kind of do seem to blur together. And you know, frankly, I like your opinion. We're probably spending too much time on this, but it's kind of the topic of interest. What do you mean if you had a choice between investing in a company and you completely controlled the security, would you prefer a convertible note over a priced round or the other way around?
It depends on the company. It depends on what the money is going to be used for. When we write convertible notes, we have various things that we add to them that give us a little extra comfort on if things don't go the way they're supposed to, like if it's a note that converts to another note that converts to another note. I have nothing against convertible notes. I like convertible notes if they make sense. Price rounds are great, but somebody's got to lead, and that's the problem. Is you just don't find enough groups that are willing to take the lead, and being a lead investor is very time consuming. Not only are you negotiating with the company on the terms, but also you're right in the middle of trying to pull together a syndicate. And so you go out to all your contacts and you say, hey, I've got this great opportunity. You become one of the people pitching the opportunity on behalf of the company. So you have to stand behind your willingness to lead, and it's just a lot of work.
Yep. Okay, enough on that topic. We have a question or an observation from Amanda at MedCurity. Go ahead.
Thanks,
Amanda.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that Loretta has been wonderful for MedCurity to work with, and we're so thankful for the investment that you made. And you've been, as has Tom, been very good with Joe and I on sharing pearls of wisdom and you know, things for us to consider in different areas. I would love for you to share what advice you would give for startups to begin developing relationships with potential investors.
I think I really like talking with groups before they're asking me for money. If it's a fit for something that we would invest in, I like to start a relationship early so that I get to know the team, I get to know what they're trying to do, and I can start my kind of background diligence, and then as it moves forward and I'm kept in the loop, and the company starts to raise money, then I'm already keyed in, and I can really, if it makes sense at that particular time, start the deeper due diligence. I'm actually doing that for several companies where I had a company come onto my radar about a month and a half ago. They are raising around, but they still haven't decided what, and we're not willing to lead in this particular case. It's not a mission related, essentially coming out of research institution, but it's a really interesting space. So I've asked him to keep me in the loop as they find a lead. I want to be ready to be able to start my deeper due diligence. So reaching out and saying, hey, you know, can I just tell you a little bit about my company? Here's the investment summary. This is where we're headed. You know, would you like to be, after you learn more about us, would you like to be kept in the loop as we move forward? If it's an area that we invest in and it makes sense, absolutely. It's no stress. Nobody's asking for us for an answer now. So that's just I think, a pretty straightforward way. And having an executive summary available for us to take a look at. One of the things I think I told you and some other groups about is it's really helpful when you're talking with a company and they're starting to raise funds, is to have access to a virtual data room, or a way that we can get access to the key documents, so we don't have to keep asking for things on a one-off. You know, oh, can you please send us your pending patents? Can you please send us your articles of incorporation? Can you please send us your employment agreements? I mean, it's just nice to have it in one place. And there are some, you know, fairly inexpensive ones, although I don't like the Google one so much as I do Dropbox. But then there are virtual data rooms where you pay, where there really is a lot of the focus is on security rather than sharing, but they're both sharing vehicles. And so having access to a virtual data room really helps when you're really getting into the deeper due diligence, so you don't have to keep asking for things, and then you as the company don't have to keep saying, oh yeah, okay, so I'm going to send the patent portfolio to you now, and then have to keep track of that. And the virtual data rooms also do log who's in your data room. Some law firms make their virtual data rooms available, some don't.
How often, what percent of the time when you're looking at an early stage company, do they set up a virtual data room as part of the due diligence? Is that common or uncommon? Okay.
About half. If they, very often, if they've been out on the fundraising road, even for a moderate amount of time, they have a virtual data room, because it's just so hard to keep track. Yep. You know, who have you sent the articles to? Who have you sent the, you know, your most recent partnership contract to? It's just, it's there.
Yep. You know, one kind of interesting observation along those lines is when an investor is doing due diligence on a company, just the due diligence process alone gives an investor a sense about the company. And if you are super organized, yes, have a data room, have all your documents, and can answer every question, that just, you know, telegraphs to an investor that you have your act together. Yes. You know what you're doing, and in all likelihood, you're operating all other aspects of your business the same way. And if you're kind of sloppy and, you know, stuff is scattered around, you know, that's an indication that maybe you're doing everything else that way. So I learned so much in due diligence, in the process of due diligence, aside from the documents that are produced, just about the company.
Also, when you're leading around and as an investor, I'm trying to pull together a syndicate. If I go out to 3 other investors who I know invest in this space, who I maybe have invested with, and I said, hey, you really should take a look at this company. This is a very cool company. I think you'll like it. If they have this tug of war and they are not getting the information that they're asking for, that actually reflects on me. Yeah. So, you know, if you go to bat for a company, you're hoping that they have their act together and that they're organized and they can provide the information in a very efficient manner.
I often tell early stage companies that, you know, I'm more interested in how a entrepreneur, how they answer the question than what the answer to the question is. Mm-hmm. Just, you know, how they answer it, how thoughtful they are, have they done their research? Yeah. Are they trying to just make stuff up, or are they honest and say, I don't know? So anyway, Dan Rourke, you had a question.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Tom. So I think it would be helpful for companies, you know, I'll say like ourselves, who are wanting to maybe meet partners that are tied to universities or IP that are in the, I'll say the AI, machine learning, natural language processing spaces. You know, how do we meet folks where that AI, you know, where that IP is coming out of, say, universities? How do you recommend making some of those introductions or that sort of thing?
I probably would go to the tech transfer office of each of those institutions and tell them what you're interested in, because they have different managers who are in charge of different areas. You know, it might be the advanced materials or the biologics or something, and they know who's working in what and can make those introductions. We can do some of that for our portfolio companies because we are in the grant sites. We know who's, say, an expert in viral vectors or something, and can make some of those introductions. But really, I think the tech transfer manager at these various institutions are the place to go.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Tyler Lafferty, do you have a question?
Yeah. Hey, Loretta, I was just wondering, how often are you actually introducing portfolio companies to one another? And have you seen it?
I think you kind of cut out, but are we connecting our portfolio companies? Not enough. That's a really good point. We try and connect our fellows to each other and to our portfolio companies, but we don't necessarily get our portfolio companies together. Two of my portfolio companies in the healthcare IT space, though, did do some collaboration when the COVID issue started, and we're each working on modules that were complementary. So they were doing some cross distribution. But generally, we don't do a lot. Several of our biotech companies all came out of the Institute for Protein Design, and so they all know each other already. But we should do more. It's a really good point.
Do you help, since you have a real focus on life sciences, do you help these companies identify capable board members?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, we try. Usually though, when they're very, very early, the board is very small. So maybe it's 3 people. It's when you're trying to, and it's usually the founders and an investor. And just by the way, we don't take a board seat. We do require that when we make an investment, we have a board observer seat, but we don't take a board seat in most cases. And in several of my companies where we have had a large investment, we have found board members to take on the role of the Series A or the Series Seed board rep. But yes, we do help find independent board members for some of our companies. And that's just really a really important point as a startup company. Please be very careful about who you invite to be on your board. I've just seen, we invested in a company, they had to clean up their board, but they had advisors on the board who had been very helpful to them in the early days. These are especially coming out of research institutions where they just don't understand. And they were more advisors, they weren't really board members. And the role of a board member really is to help mentor and help the CEO. And if you can always have boards of advisors, absolutely. And if you want to provide them with some sort of compensation, that's fine. But your corporate board, you need to be very careful about how that's structured and how you grow it.
What are the characteristics of a good board member?
Involved, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to necessarily be an expert in the area, but they need to be willing to learn. They need to be available to the CEO. They need to be willing to roll up their sleeves. And if you're helping on the compensation or the governance or whatever, you need to be willing and understand that you're going to be asked to do work. I'm on one of my boards. I am an observer, but I'm helping them on the renegotiation of a contract. And because I did a lot of licensing in the past, and so I can bring some of that to bear. So I think a good board, I think you need to be aligned. You don't have to be all of one mind, but you have to understand where the CEO wants the company to go and generally agree. Every now and then you have to kind of retrench, maybe do some strategic planning, but you have to kind of have the same vision. And this is one thing that we have to ask early on is we have seen some great companies, really great companies that will be fantastic lifestyle companies. And that's not pejorative. It means they're going to make money, they're going to be good livings for people, but they're not necessarily going to be a venture-backed exitable company. And those are what we're looking for. So we are always looking for good opportunities, but not necessarily all good opportunities fit what a venture-backed backable company looks like.
Yep. Pam, you have a question. Pam?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Loretta, for taking the time. As a matter of fact, that your last statement ties into my question, your comment about a venture-backed or an exitable company. How often does WRF Capital look for or encourage sort of non-financial or non-traditional goals, such as environmental sustainability or diversity within the executive team, within the employees, supplier chain, anything like that?
Those are important. They're important, but they're not sufficient. We have to back companies that are going to make us money. We will only continue to exist if we back companies that are making us money. Our if you want to call them revenues, we are a nonprofit, come from our public and private portfolios. That's it. So if we don't back companies that have exits that bring money into the foundation, then we will cease to exist after a while. So if it's got social goals, if there are diverse teams, that is fantastic. And a company I'm following right now, they were looking for a female CEO. They found one, and I think that is amazing. And she's a great fit for them. But we want to make money when we invest in companies.
So Pam, I'm sorry, Loretta, you know, one question, of course, I have to ask during the current environment is, you know, kind of a two-part question. One is, have you altered your investment strategy because of COVID-19? And then the second part being, you know, what sort of input or advice or guidance are you giving to your portfolio companies during this time frame?
It's pretty much, I think, what everyone else is saying. We haven't really changed our investment strategy. We do understand that our portfolio companies now have hurdles that nobody expected. I was looking over the financials for almost all my portfolio companies just the other day because we were doing an internal review, and we're not going to be hitting the revenues that we thought we would hit. It's not going to happen. But you know, with careful cash management, with looking at new opportunities that this brings, with being very careful with and making additional cuts where possible, I don't think any of my companies, in one case, it's making it a little more difficult to raise money because people can't come up and visit the company, but none of them, I think, are in danger of going out of business because of COVID. A couple have stepped up and come up, like I told you, the two healthcare IT companies with modules that I think have raised their profile out there and have brought them new customers. And in one case, it was a medical device company that entered a revenue line that they never would have considered in the past. But because physicians' offices were closed for months, they did a new direct-to-consumer / with the physician in the middle revenue stream, and it's actually working really well. So you know, you have to be flexible and look for opportunities.
Okay, we have a question from Allison. Allison? I'll go ahead and read her. Oh, go ahead, Allison.
Oh, sorry. Did I just pop in?
Yep, jump in. Go ahead.
Hi. Thanks, Loretta. Thanks for taking the time. I have a question about IP and largely around the balance between in-house generated IP for a company, or the potential for in-house generated IP, versus that which they may in-license from a university or a research institution, since that's the bulk of maybe where your companies might come from. Do you have a sense of what a balance might look like? And then I guess to spin off on that, companies that have co-owned IP between a company and a collaboration with their former university, or perhaps a partnership with the university?
Yeah, I mean, each of those situations we have in our portfolio. We expect that all companies will be creating their own IP, whether it's patentable or not. In many cases, the healthcare IT companies will not make patents, but we expect that there will be internally generated IP no matter what. And if when we are looking at and doing our due diligence, one of the things that I look carefully at are the licenses. And what are the expectations? What's the what are the terms of licenses? So I'm not exactly sure what your question is, but we invest in all those that range, and only university generated plus company generated, and then sometimes it's just company generated.
Perfect. Well, we're only have one more minute here, and I always like to kind of conclude with one final question. And you kind of alluded a little bit ago about exits. What has been your most successful investment? And it doesn't necessarily have to be measured by a financial outcome, but what investment have you made, or WRF Capital, that you like to talk about?
Well, I have a couple of things I want to say just to add at the end, but our most successful for IRR was our investment in Juno, which was a CAR-T company spin out of the Hutch. And that company went public in 18 months, which is very not normal. But that was our highest return. One of the ones I'm most proud of is CSATs, which stands for Computer Source Assessment of Technology. Of surgical technology, a crowdsourced assessment of surgical technology, CSATs. And that was a company out of Seattle Children's and the UW. And we gave them a gift very early on to test this hypothesis and their engine at Seattle Children's. And it generated some really interesting data, and we put in some of the very earliest money, and it was acquired by J&J about 3.5 years later. Okay. And the team was amazing. The board was amazing. There were some hiccups. J&J was not one of my expected acquisition or acquirers, but they were very interested and pretty much beat everybody to the opportunity. But one thing I do want to mention, because we are interested in life science and healthcare especially, is if you are presenting this opportunity to me, and I think to many others, it's very, very helpful if you can very cogently map out the landscape. And because in healthcare especially, there are so many different players, and they all have different requirements for information, for money, who makes the decisions, the payer, the provider, the patient, the pharmacy benefits manager, if there's a drug involved, there's just so much involved. So please, if you can, be able to explain the whole landscape, who's involved, and what their role is in making their environment work. And that's really, really important, whether it's healthcare, like I just said, and I just was talking with an advanced materials company where it took some tries, but they finally came up with a really useful sketch of who did what and why.
Yep, well, that's particularly important in healthcare, how all the pieces fit together. Well, Loretta, it's a couple of minutes after 1, and we promise to kind of keep everybody just to an hour here. So thank you very, very much for enlightening us today. And also thank you very much for keeping a close eye on opportunities in Spokane.
Absolutely.
And we'll continue to introduce companies to you that fit your criteria, and look forward to seeing you over here when you have time to actually be in Spokane. So thank you very much.
I'd love to. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye now.